So I'm replying to Vince's topic of the week, good, evil, or spoilers. I've always been drawn to high elves within the Warhammer Fantasy world, uh, mainly because they, to me, represented the nature of unintended consequences and failing to know oneself, to know thyself. On the surface, they are the classically good race, which makes them uninteresting to a lot of people. But I'd always seen them as, in that light. They are supposed to be champions of good, of light, of order, and yet they were constantly getting in the way of themselves, and then failing that which they were supposed to be protecting, guarding. And we saw this certainly in the End Times series, and especially in the, what Vince appropriately called the Shakespearean tragedy of the Cain portion of that series. I loved the way that they told that story. I thought it was a very appropriate payoff in terms of what initially drew me to the elves, and especially the high elves. So I find that fascinating because it's a reflection of real life. All of us struggle with this challenge of knowing ourselves. Every single day of being honest with who we are, our failures, our strengths, all of these things. The high elves were not, and it was their downfall. So this subject of unintended consequences is one that I've thought a lot about, and was especially taken with it in the context of philanthropy. So I had spent about 13 years working in charity, and about 5 years ago got really interested in better understanding what the hell is this thing called that we call philanthropy in the world, and learned about a guy named George Macaulay, a academician historian who wrote a book, Philanthropy Reconsidered. Uh, he had summarized an incredible amount of work that he did in a very small monograph. I would highly recommend it for anyone interested in not just philanthropy, but in some ways kind of the nature of the human condition, and the nature of why are we here. A source of it's a profound source of meaning in my mind, up there with a book like Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, or books of that nature. So he talked about how philanthropy began over 2,500 years ago in the Greek play Prometheus Bound, supposedly written by the famous Greek playwright Aeschylus. In that book, the words philanthropos tropos were used for the first time in recorded history. Philanthropos tropos meaning humanity-loving character, used as an expression of Prometheus's act of stealing fire from Zeus, who wanted to destroy mankind. We were at the time proto-humans in the myth as it goes, proto-humans who were very unimpressive, and Zeus wanted to destroy us. Prometheus stole fire from him, of course representing knowledge, arts, culture, technology, and along with a second gift, that of blind hope or optimism, a belief in the future. He gave us both, which we use to improve our condition. We had blind faith in our capacity to use fire toward good ends, and that hope is what drove us to do it in the first place. So the two intersected to show Zeus what we were capable of, the inherent potential and promise within man, which saved us from his wrath. And so that was the beginning of philanthropy. Philanthropy not as a segment of human activity, but the source, the heart of human activity. It began as an adjective, a way of being. And in many ways, aspirationally, it should remain the core of what it is or what it should be to be human. But now, in relation to Warhammer and the High Elves, and this subject of good, evil, and spoilers, the flip side, as we've seen with the myth of Prometheus over the decades, is the nature of unintended consequences. Mary Shelley, in particular, really nailed it with her novel Frankenstein or the Modern Prometheus. So that's the flip side of the coin. You had one of the original champions of humankind, the Prometheus, that archetype. Also, in that same archetype, the development of the flip side of that coin, of one who aspires to be a champion of light, of good, who, through their good intentions, lead to hell. As the saying goes, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. So I've certainly experienced, unfortunately, aspects of this in my life, and I imagine many of us have. on both sides. Where I've made great mistakes that in fact turned out to be a net positive because of the changes that they wrought, and so on. So yeah, the subject of unintended consequences in the context of philanthropy, of Prometheus, or of Hyles, or whatever it might be, I find very fascinating, and an expression of the intersection of good, evil, and spoilers, which is really the heart of who we each are, what we each have within us, and the inherent beauty and and an unfortunate aspect of ourselves is how horrible we are at understanding the consequences, and particularly the long range consequences of our actions, of our inability to predict the future. Uh, so it goes. So, anyway, hopefully that was somewhat interesting. And thanks for Vince for the really fascinating topic. All right, take care.